This video is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Alright, in this video we are going to be packed and stacked because we're talking wall riding, we're talking Jimmie Johnson, we're talking Kyle Busch in the Indy 500, and we're talking Indy Lights, or Indy Next, whatever, NXT, whatever we're calling that series. But if you haven't already, be sure to go down in the description below and hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button too while you're down there. I think this is one of the best places for motorsport on the web, and hopefully you'll find out in this video. But first, one of the people who found out about that is DraftKings Sportsbook, and they're today's video sponsor. It's October, which now means the racing season is winding down and football is beginning to take over our lives. And hopefully, you've got an idea of how teams are stacking up against one another. So why not add a little more fun into the mix? Today's video sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is dishing out an awesome offer for all their new customers. All new customers have to do is sign up using the promo code LAND, hey, that's my name, and bet $5 on any football team to win and receive an additional $200 in free bets if your bet cashes. That's right, new customers who bet at least $5 on any football team to win this weekend will get an additional $200 in free bets if your bet hits. Plus, with same-game parlays, you can combine multiple bets from the same game to give yourself a shot at even bigger winnings all season long. And for those of you who are living in a state right now where sports betting is not yet available, don't forget DraftKings Daily Fantasy, where they have been innovating even more ways to win some cash this football season. And if football isn't your thing, remember that the basketball season is now hot and heavy, and DraftKings has a ton of ways for you to get in on the action. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code LAND and receive $200 in free bets if their bet hits after placing a $5 pregame wager. That's promo code LAND only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, we're starting off on a negative because it's me, Jeff Gluck, speaking to Kyle Busch when Kyle was announcing today his truck team switched to Chevrolet power, that on the Indy 500 opportunity for next year, it's kind of went dark. It's all dried up, says Kyle Busch. And I gotta say, this is a big IndyCar miss. It's not an unexpected one, but it's disappointing nonetheless. Certainly, engine considerations, Kyle can only do this Indy 500 with a Chevy behind him, and the Chevy teams are quickly drying up. There's probably two options left, and it looks like one of those is going to get taken potentially by another Kyle, because while Kyle Busch might be out, I still think there's a pretty good chance of Kyle Larson being in the Indianapolis 500, at least on the entry list for next year. And I'm told that Larson is talking with Dreyer Reinbold Racing to drive the car that was previously piloted by Stage Karam, but apparently Karam is actually out at Dreyer Reinbold Racing for next year. So that could open the door for a NASCAR star, and it sounds like Kyle Larson right now would be the front runner if a NASCAR driver does get tapped for Dreyer Reinbold Racing, and appropriately, that car is numbered 24 in the Hendrick Motorsports font. So let's stay tuned on that one, but that's what I've heard. Indy Lights has been rebranded to Indy NXT. Yes, really. This did not go over very well on social media, a lot of negativity, and it makes me understand why the marketing department over at 16th and Georgetown would hate absolutely everybody, because yes, the negativity I think is a little bit unwarranted here, because at the end of the day, this is a name change for a feeder series. Like, this is not the most important thing in the world. There are more pressing matters, like the fact that Kyle Busch is not going to be in the Indy 500 because engine supply issues, or teams are unwilling to put him in a car. That, I would say that's like one of 100 things that need to be done before Indy Lights got a name change. So yes, I understand why people are mad about it, and I understand for a lot of people, myself included, an Indy Lights change isn't even on the radar in terms of things that needed to be changed. But at the end of the day, if Firestone, who's the new title sponsor of this series, wanted it to be this way, I can't say it's a bad thing. And I think the biggest change next year for Indy Lights is going to be those Firestone tires. And I think that is going to generate a lot of excitement. I think there's going to be a lot more cars this year, or there is going to be a lot more cars this year in Indy Lights. So there's a lot of positives in Indy Lights. The name change, really just window dressing at the end of the day. Jimmie Johnson. All right, we're talking a lot of things here. As first reported by Jordan Bianchi at the beginning of the week, Jimmie Johnson has announced that he has indeed bought into the Petty GMS team and will be running a limited number of NASCAR Cup Series races throughout next year. As I mentioned in my video the other day, logically, the first confirmed race that Jimmie will compete in for the team is the Daytona 500, because of course, why wouldn't you? If you're a big name driver and NASCAR's biggest race would be the best place to showcase a sponsor, whether that's Carvana or someone else. That was not announced today, by the way, which sponsors will be associated with this effort. However, Jimmie will have to compete to get into the Daytona 500. They are not expecting a charter for that third Petty GMS car. This also now opens up the question of Jimmie Johnson and the Indianapolis 500. Much like Kyle Busch, now it would seem as though Jimmie Johnson has some manufacturer issues, potentially if he was to go over to Chip Ganassi Racing, which runs Honda in IndyCar. Well, thankfully, we had a response from someone who was there when I asked about it on Twitter, and it comes from none other than Jenna Fryer of the Associated Press. She replied to me on Twitter saying that Jimmie wants to run North Wilkesboro, which is, of course, NASCAR's all-star race. And if they make him eligible, of course, that's the number one key. And, of course, that conflicts with the Indianapolis 500 qualifying, which, again, is a point that I brought up in the previous video. He's waiting on that, the confirmation to be eligible for the All-Star race, and, according to Jenna, waiting for to see which opportunities might be in the Indy 500. She also says that Ganassi is waiting to finalize the fourth car before the Indy 500 lineup is finalized, and that lines up with something that I heard from my source at Ganassi, who has told me quite a bit of information, including the NTT thing. The thing, as I understand it right now, yes, Jen is absolutely right here. Ganassi is working on their 4 full-time cars. Once again, and I'm going to stand by this because he's beginning to backpedal, Nicholas Latifi, I've heard, is the front runner for the 4th Chip Ganassi racing car. Could it be wrong? Maybe. I don't know. But the source that told me that has not been wrong yet. They've also been right to tell me that the Indy 500 lineup at Chip Ganassi Racing right now isn't a consideration. And it's nice of Jenna to confirm that, because as of right now, as I understand it at Chip Ganassi Racing, the focus is on 4 cars. It's not on 5 cars. That's not saying that they can't go to 5 cars for the Indianapolis 500, but I don't see it as a priority right now. Jenna Fryer doesn't see it as a priority right now, and Jimmie Johnson doesn't see it as a priority right now with Chip Ganassi Racing because he's playing the waiting game. Eric Smith from Race Review Online, good buddy of mine, had a few things to say or to add to this as well from the press conference. He says that Jimmie Johnson still has a good relationship with Chip Ganassi and is open to some IndyCar and sports car races. That sports car race, of course, would include the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Jimmie Johnson is been long rumored to be a part of the Garage 56 effort when they're going to take a NASCAR Cup Series car over there with Hendrick Motorsports. Jimmie is still interested in sports cars, Indy cars, and the possibility of an off-road truck race. And Alex Bowman offered him a Chili Bowl ride, though he doesn't know the impact of his new commitment as a team owner and how it plays out on other races. And he hasn't crossed the bridge yet on the manufacturer dilemma. Okay, so we're kind of back in the Kyle Busch situation, and there's a common denominator between Kyle Busch and Jimmie Johnson, and that's Chevy. And without putting them on blast too much, because I don't want to be unfair, but it's a lot of what we saw last year with Chevy. Chevy, it looks like right now, will have less Indy 500 entries than Honda will. Honda's going to be pretty much tapped out, whether they tap out at 17, 18, or 19 engines for next year's Indianapolis 500. That's as far as Honda, I think, can possibly push it. That's as far as they've ever pushed it in this era, the 2.2 liter V6 era, in terms of Indy 500 entries. I think they were at 19 in 2018, which was, of course, also a year that we had 18 engines. 36 entries. Jimmie Johnson right now is a Chevy-affiliated team owner with Petty GMS. Does he have the same contract, or will he have the same contract restrictions as Kyle Busch does? I bet you Kyle Busch could find a ride for the Indy 500 still, even with the current state of things on the entry list, if he could go talk to Honda teams. He's unable to do that. And yes, there's a home coast car available, but really right now the most realistic place that a ironclad Chevy team or driver can go and race the Indy 500 is Dreyer and Reinbold Racing. One of their seats is spoken for. The second one, which we thought for a long time was going to be locked in at Sage Karam, that's not the case. Sage is out. So there is one seat at Dreyer and Reinbold Racing, and like I said, I believe that Kyle Larson is the front runner for that. So if Jimmie and Kyle Busch are not able to go run the Indy 500 in a Chevy, they're not going to run the Indy 500 unless they're going to Juncos. So, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That's it's a bit of a gut punch, and it's a shame because we know that like Team Penske has gone as many as 5 cars before. They're going to be at 3. Tim Cindric, the president, and more power to him, says that we're locked in at 3, and frankly, the performance is better at 3 based on my observation. So I don't blame that team for not expanding, but it is the house team at this point. So, for the good of the sport, maybe put Kyle Busch in the car. I don't know. I'm just the guy on the internet saying those sort of things. Let's talk a little bit about the NASCAR side of things, shall we? Because that was the announcement today. Petty GMS Racing, I think a lot of people have zeroed in on this, which is it's a great step for that organization. I think it's great for Richard Petty, who was in the doldrums of NASCAR for the longest time. I think it's great for Eric Jones, who got out of the absolutely crazy environment that is Joe Gibbs Racing right now. Wow, what a dumpster fire. How many times do we have to say it? I made a whole video on it. You should check it out. And now he gets to team up with Richard Petty, Maury Gallagher, and Jimmie Johnson. And I think that team, especially with Jimmie's expertise, is going to go up. I think we're looking at stonks from that perspective. And I'm really excited to see what other races Jimmie runs outside of the Daytona 500. And if he can get approved, the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro. Ross Chastain and the move. It's a move that may be outlawed by the time we get around to 2023. So here's what NASCAR said about it. The two Steves, O'Donnell and Phelps, at the State of the Sport address earlier today.
It's a really unique part of NASCAR that's allowing for this. Sure, there's some challenges, right? And it raises some questions about certain moves. But it brings so much intensity, not only to each and every cutoff race, but each and every round. And I think the objective of this was to make sure that, when we go to that second race of the season, winning matters, winning stages matters. Where are you at in points? And you're seeing it each and every race. No way that move happens in our history without the format that we have. And that's a good thing. And that's really neat to see. And we got to continue to work now with the race teams in the off season. There's a lot of dialogue, of course, of what do you do? But I think we've been pretty frank of, we're going to officiate the race the same way we have for the first 35 races.
And so you guys are probably pretty well aware of my personal thoughts on it, which is it's the greatest move in NASCAR that can never happen again. And I think the team owners and the drivers are going to come to a pretty unanimous conclusion when they speak to NASCAR about this, which is, yeah, it was amazing, but we probably don't need to be doing it again. And I'm beginning to suspect, really, really suspect that someone's going to do it at Phoenix. And how teams are going to try to prevent that move from working again, there is a potential for some dangerous things to happen at Phoenix just from guys flat-footing it into the wall and seeing what happens. Especially the way that dog leg is designed, where it's so wide and cars can go like 10 wide. And, oh, by the way, also the pit exit is there. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the right move whenever they do make a rule. And I do believe a rule is coming to outlaw wall riding. Again, it says nothing it's not saying that Ross Chastain doesn't have absolutely massive melons. It's not saying that the move was wrong for him to do. I think it's great. I think it was a great move. I think it created so much interest, obviously. But there comes a point where things are too ridiculous, and this may be a situation where things get a little too hot and heavy. And, in racing, rule changes, believe it or not, are as much a part of the history as anything. And I would not be surprised to see a rule change coming, and you shouldn't be too upset when they have to ban something that is a competitive advantage, but might be a little too crazy. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and I will see you in the next video.